Legal to be legal. Today we have Gustavo and Elizabeth joining us from Jacoby and Meyers. We're here to talk about accidents of any kind. Is it at home? Is it on the road? Is it at work? What do you do? How do you do it? How do you protect your rights? Gustavo and Elizabeth are here to explain it to us.
Calificas para ser legal, quieres saber, solo llama al abogado Andrés Mejer.
So let's start with, let's find out a little bit about you guys. Why did you become an attorney? What was your journey like?
Liz, ladies first.
Oh, I thank you. I became an attorney because I realized it was so important to educate people about what their rights are. You can't protect your own rights if you don't know what they are. But so essentially, no matter where you come from, you have to know what rights you have and keep them protected. That's why I became a lawyer.
And why did you choose injury law?
I essentially chose injury law to help people. It's an area where people don't do so well. and what I mean by that is you're not happy to call me. If you got hurt on the job, the injury just begins. My job is try to help you minimize the insult to your injury by making sure you get everything you're entitled to.
What about you, Gustavo? What was your journey to the kind of law that you do now?
Having grown up in a Spanish-speaking household, I saw firsthand what it was like, not only for my family, but other members of my family in the Spanish-speaking community, to not really understand or know what their rights were, if something happened to them, how to go about getting help. I saw a lot of things happen to people, bad things happen that kind of basically fell through the cracks. So from an early age, I kind of made it my goal and my mission to help not only everyone, but particularly those that were Spanish speaking or didn't understand the English language. It didn't have to be Spanish, and make sure that they were protected when something went wrong.
Yeah, when I was in law school, my first job was for of counsel to the public administrator. And I was still in law school at the time, but because I spoke Spanish, they had me doing everything. And they lost out on a lot because they just didn't know. They didn't know their rights. They didn't know how to protect. And as much as I tried to guide them, it's really what put me on my path. It sounds like yours was a very similar experience, Gustavo.
Yep, it was. It was.
So what kind of law do you specialize in today?
We cover a rainbow of cases stemming from car crashes. We don't call them accidents. We call them crashes and collisions. Accidents are what happen to, little kids who drop their bottle or that's an accident. These collisions and crashes are unsafe choices that people make. So we cover situations from automobile crashes, tractor-trailer crashes, cases involving trip and falls, whether it's on sidewalks or defective conditions out either in the public or in private homes or apartment buildings, all the way through work-related accidents at construction sites, height-related cases.
You guys
all the way to dog bites.
You guys do anything with nursing homes? I imagine that there might be some complaints coming forward with the number of coronavirus cases in nursing homes for some reason.
It's funny you should ask. About 2 years ago, we started to focus heavily on our nursing home practice and the neglect that unfortunately nursing home residents suffer at the hands of understaffed, underpaid, and undercaring facilities. And now with the COVID-19, it's going to add an entirely new dimension as to whether or not you can actually file cases. In some states, the governors have given the states and the facilities immunity because they're looking at this as a global pandemic, not something that was the fault of any one particular person or entity. So it it really becomes a complex piece of litigation that right now it's so new that we don't know which way it's going to go.
Yeah, isn't that great? I mean, we all know that not all agencies, not all, say, nursing homes adapt appropriately. Not all are proactive. Not all, do preventative measures to try to avoid exposure. Some did absolutely nothing. And to get immunity for that just seems criminal.
It's tough. It's unfortunately state by state, and New Jersey and New York haven't really sounded off yet on where they stand. Right. So it remains to be seen.
I know my mother-in-law was in a rehab place that in the middle of the holidays, the moment that there was a case in a coronavirus diagnosis, I know I drove practically in the middle of the night, picked her up and brought her home.
Yeah.
Because we just couldn't take that chance.
Of course. The unfortunate part is for those that don't have family members that are kind of at the mercy of the nursing homes, and you go to these nursing homes, or a family puts you there thinking, having the best of intentions that this nursing home is going to do the right thing.
Right.
And little do they know what's going on behind closed doors, and
scary stuff.
Scary stuff.
What about you, Elizabeth? What kind of accidents or injuries or collisions do you work on?
Crashes, never accidents. Collisions and crashes.
Sometimes I self-correct.
I mirror everything that Gustavo says. However, I want to add on that we also have a workers' compensation arm of our firm, which makes sure that people who are injured on the job or suffer an occupational disease or work-related injury can get the benefits that they're entitled to through the workers' compensation system.
Is there any time limitation for a workers' compensation claim?
Yes, that's a great question. You actually should report your injury to your employer within the first 30 days that it happened. And then you have a 2-year statute to file your workers' compensation claim.
And if I didn't report it?
It can be problematic, but I would tell you to still call us and we'd see if we can help.
So if it's like a repetitive injury, for example, not I slipped and fell and I knew it happened. It's, it feels okay, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel okay.
And that's a more gray area, absolutely. If you're injured,
I love gray.
Some trauma, you're injured and it's definite, this is what happened, versus one of the best examples I have is the carpal tunnel syndrome for those who are on computers or working with their hands. Essentially, once you are diagnosed, you follow that 30-day rule.
No, that's good advice. Thank you very much. Absolutely. What about you, Gustavo? Is there a time limit for filing a claim in the type of scenarios you typically see?
Yeah, in the state of New Jersey, you have a 2-year statute of limitations from the date of the incident to the filing of the papers with the court commencing the lawsuit. If you go above and beyond the 2 years, you have to show just cause to a court as to why you missed that deadline. But it is a time-sensitive bar, so you want to do it within the 2 years. Now, if your case involves a governmental entity, there are different timeframes. But generally speaking, it's 2 years for motor vehicle crashes.
And do you need to prove that someone made a mistake or did something wrong in the type of work that you typically see?
Well, that's usually the genesis or the basis of how we file our lawsuits. Yeah. We fundamentally look at why or how did this incident take place? Who either didn't follow the laws or decided not to, made active decisions not to follow the law and made unsafe choices. In the state of New Jersey, if you are filing a lawsuit against someone, let's say there's a car crash at an intersection. Yeah. If based on the police report and the evidence that we're looking at, it appears as though you yourself may have been more than 51% at fault, then in the state of New Jersey, you don't have a case. So those are other things that you have to look at in terms of negligence, the amount of negligence, culpability, things of that nature.
So things like having a seatbelt, whether I had a seatbelt or not, that's what you mean? Maybe I was also partially at fault?
Well, as far as the seatbelt situation is concerned, you can be stopped at a red light, no seatbelt on, and get rear-ended. And because you didn't have a seatbelt, it has absolutely nothing to do with liability and who was at fault for causing the crash. What the seatbelt defense will be is that you failed to mitigate the potential harms that you faced by not wearing it. And then they would have to call in a seatbelt expert to say, had Mr. So-and-so been wearing a seatbelt, he wouldn't have had such severe or serious injuries as he suffered. And then that goes to mitigating the damages.
For Elizabeth, in a workers' compensation scenario, do you have to prove that the employer did something wrong?
No, it's the complete opposite of what Gustavo just described about liability and fault.
Life's easy.
Fault does not matter as long as you can prove that you were injured in the scope of your employment.
Great. And what about if I'm not a U.S. citizen, or if I am, dare I say, illegal?
You are.
Can I file a claim?
You certainly can. You're still entitled to compensation.
And that's the same thing, I hope, if I had a car wreck or car collision, not accident.
Absolutely. And that's unfortunately one of the misconceptions or the myths that many Spanish-speaking individuals or folks that don't speak English fear, that they were involved in a crash. It wasn't their fault. They're hurt. But they don't want to file a lawsuit because now they're worried that because of all these, very restrictive immigration laws, that now all of a sudden I'm going to put myself out there to possibly being deported. Your immigration status has absolutely nothing to do with us filing a lawsuit for personal injuries. It's negligence that governs the case, not your legal status.
Thank you very much, because I know a lot of my clients are, I can't tell you how many times I've heard some version of, well, I'm afraid to.
Right.
It's tough. It's tough.
I'm a victim of a crime, but if I call the police, am I going to get arrested?
Yep.
Whether that's in a domestic violence scenario, whether it's an accident, whether it's an accident at, an injury at work, or,
I can tell you that I've been practicing for over 20 years, and I've never, both doing defense work as well as I've been with Jacoby and Meyers now for over 15 years. I have never either experienced or even heard of a case where someone brought a civil action for personal injuries and they were deported as a result.
Yeah, well, I could certainly say as an immigration attorney that is not a factor at all.
Criminal is something different, but that's not what we're talking about.
Well, so the scenario where I'm driving drunk, I'm involved in a car accident that I didn't cause. I was pulled over but drunk, and a car hits me in the back. But I get charged with a DUI. Now all of a sudden, I might get deported.
Well, you're going to have a lot of problems, only because in a situation like that where you're driving while intoxicated, you better hope that you didn't hurt anyone else in the process, because that will probably be the number one trigger for whether or not the type of plea deal or sentence that you're going to get if you were charged criminally. But as far as a civil lawsuit in New Jersey, if you're driving while intoxicated and it's proven, you have no case. Whether you were sitting at a light and were rear-ended, you have no case.
Even if I even if I was not at fault.
Correct. In the state of New Jersey, they're very strict about it. If you're at a red light and you're completely intoxicated and you fall asleep and someone comes in and rear-ends you, you do not have a case. So not only do you not have a case, you're probably going to get arrested on top of it. So it's an insult to injury. So in New York, they're a little more lenient.
Yep.
But in New Jersey,
and you fall asleep at the wheel, at least turn the car off and take the key out of the ignition.
Well, or at least try and get over the GW bridge over into New York, because things are
then you're good. So what happens if, so you gave the example of a DUI, but what happens if I've had scenarios, let's stick with I'm hit in the rear, right? So okay. I've done nothing wrong, I'm stopped at a stop sign or at a red light, and some guy hits me in the back. But it just so happens I don't have a license. Not I don't have it on me, meaning I don't have a valid license because I'm not in the country legally.
Got it. Well, luckily in New York and in New Jersey, not having a license would not bar you from having a personal injury action. The fact of the matter is that if you're following the law, whether you have a license or not, and someone else is negligent in the way they were operating their vehicle and they hurt you as a result, you do have a cause of action. Most people get nervous, and it's a tough, I'm not gonna lie and say that it's not a difficult issue to deal with, because oftentimes if the trial judge allows it to come in that you were unlicensed at the time, there are a lot of folks that sit on jurors that say, well, whether you're at fault or not, had you not been on the roadway because you didn't have a license, we would all not be here. Right. So it's something that you have to consider, but it doesn't immediately bar you from having a lawsuit.
So it's a factor, it's a contributing factor. It may even be a decisive factor depending on your particular case.
Correct.
Which is why you need an attorney who's going to spot the issue and be able to plan around it.
Correct.
What if, so pivoting to you, Elizabeth, for a moment, the fact that I'm undocumented or not, whether I have a license or not, is that at all relevant to if I have an injury on the job?
No, it does not matter. If you are not a citizen, you are still entitled to workers' compensation benefits. If you're collecting cash instead of a formal paycheck, you can still be entitled to workers' compensation benefits. It's a matter of being able to prove your relationship with your employer and what your income and wages were. If your employer is not carrying workers' compensation insurance coverage, they can be punished.
Oh yeah.
But you can still collect from the uninsured employers fund, which is a fund set up to protect workers whose employers are breaking the law.
So I don't need to worry about that. I don't even need to think about it. All I need to be concerned about is I was injured and I need a good attorney.
Yeah.
The rest, Elizabeth or Gustavo is going to take care for me, correct? I don't need to worry about any of that. So you mentioned if I pay cash, what are some ways that I could show that I'm employed if I got paid cash? If you don't have pay stubs because you received cash, the next best thing is going to be referring back to your tax returns, which means filing and claiming the income. You're going to have a very hard time collecting workers' compensation wages if you were not declaring that income. That's a bridge that can be crossed if it needs to be crossed. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Can I get my treatment paid even if I don't get monetary compensation, even if I can't prove the exact amount? Or is it, it's both or nothing? No,
that's a great question. So if you can't prove your income for the lost wages, you are still entitled to the medical benefits.
Okay. And if I file, so I get some version of this way too many times. You know, I was injured. Yes, I went to the hospital, but I worked with my employer for 10 years. He's a good guy. I don't want to hurt him. And more importantly, I need my job. I don't want him to fire me. What do I do?
It's a real tough spot to be in because, of course, you need to work. He may be a good guy. You don't want to hurt him. But the bottom line is, if you don't tell the truth at your initial medical appointment about exactly how you were injured, you are going to ruin your claim. It's very hard to go backwards and try to recreate what happened. So being honest is key, and realize that that's about protecting you, and you have to protect yourself when you're hurt at work because no one else will.
So if I make a claim and my employer fires me, what do I do?
That is illegal. If your employer files you for making a claim, you need to contact an attorney right away. There are recourses that can be held. They cannot discriminate against you for filing a claim by making your job harder, nor can they fire you.
And so, given that we are in the time of the pandemic, and if I am an essential employee and I get sick, do I, and I think I got it at work. Do I have anything there? Can I make a claim?
Frankly, we're in some real uncharted territory right now. This is also new. And as Gustavo said earlier, the states haven't weighed in definitively on many things. Yeah. But the core of the workers' comp system is that if you can prove through medical documentation that you contracted the virus through your course of work, through your activities at work, then you should be able to collect workers' compensation insurance. Here we're recommending people take notes, keep a log. If you know you've been exposed, the dates, the times, that will help us to prove the claim when the time comes to bring it.
Tell the supervisor, communicate with your supervisory staff. Let them know, let your colleagues know, so that at least there's some kind of either a paper trail or at least something. Because it's going to be very difficult with people walking around and, being able to contract coronavirus just about anywhere, to be able to pinpoint it to your job. It's an ideal claim because now you have someone to sue. But if you stopped at the gas station and you used the pump and you weren't wearing gloves, and now all of a sudden you got it there on the way home from work, now you're forgetting that you stopped at the gas station, or you stopped to get milk, or you were talking to your neighbor and you weren't socially distant, and now all of a sudden it's going to be a difficult road ahead for these work-related claims.
I suppose some jobs might be easier than others. If I'm a correctional officer in a prison that has 15 cases, if I'm a doctor at an emergency room, there are some scenarios. If I work at a nursing home that has diagnosed cases, I suppose it might be easier. If I work in construction where I'm in a different job every other week,
of course,
that might make it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, and remember, most of these nursing home cases where the residents are contracting COVID, you have folks that are sitting in a nursing facility. They're not going out.
Right.
They contracted it because the workers were bringing it in.
Right.
So it's it's unfortunate because when you hear it on the news, a lot of people have that misperception that these older folks are all of a sudden just contracting COVID and it's spreading like wildfire, but it's really the staff or the mismanagement of the staff allowing workers to come in untested that could possibly be sick to bring it in.
So bringing it back, since you're talking about nursing homes, let's change it back to the scenario where we talked about motor vehicle collisions. If I don't have health insurance, can I still get treatment? So I am injured pretty badly. What do I do?
Well, the vehicle that you're in, whether you're a driver and you own it, or you're a passenger and you're in the vehicle, your your medical benefits and any lost wage claims that you might have are going to be covered by that vehicle's policy. So what the hope is that when folks go and get their auto insurance, that they don't choose the cheapest plans, because those are the ones that are going to offer you the least amount of protection if, God forbid, you happen to be in a motor vehicle crash. But because it's the cheapest, that's what everyone usually goes for. And then they lament later on.
Tort reform really hit New Jersey hard in 1993 under Governor Whitman when they brought in the tort threshold, and they allowed people to opt in or opt out by paying less. A lot of people who know about it are because they got hurt from it. They didn't know about it in advance.
Otherwise, you don't know.
We need to educate people before they get hurt.
We
need to do a lot more of these.
And the interesting thing is that the insurance brokers get incentives from the insurance carriers to not offer the bigger policies that might only be a couple of extra bucks, because the more minimal policies that they sell, the more that they get incentivized. So it's
a bad faith claim.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Has anybody brought a bad faith claim like that?
No, because you'd have to prove it. But a perfect example is when I went into my insurance broker to renew my insurance, I opted for the most amount of insurance, and my carrier and the broker was like, "Well, why do you need so much insurance?" And I said, "No. The question should be, as my broker, I want you to have the most coverage that you can afford.
Yeah.
And why would you give me a $25,000 policy when I can afford for an extra $100 or $200 a year, I can get a $250 policy and cover myself. So I found out that it's because they have incentives.
When I did insurance coverage work, we always had, we did our best to get the underwriter's file. Sometimes we tried to expand it to get other to see what the policies and procedures were of the insurance company, because sometimes they actually gave it to you, and what you found there was eye-opening.
Yep. So for non-English speaking clients, who go into a broker and they push the cheapest policy on you, and they'll tell you, you don't need more than that. They
I'm doing you a favor.
They're thinking, hey, I saved money, but they don't realize that the minute that they get on the road, they've just basically shot themselves in the foot, so to speak, because if God forbid they get into a crash, they now have the lowest amount of coverage. So it's a global educational type of thing that clients need to know.
Yeah.
So Gustavo, why don't you give us your closing arguments?
On which case?
What makes Jacoby and Meyers different?
It's a great question. Listen, Jacoby and Meyers has been a household staple and name throughout the tri-state area for over 40, 50 years. I remember when I was a kid, if you were playing in the backyard and you got hurt, they would say, you better call Jacoby Meyers.
I remember those.
Ironically, fast forward, I'm an attorney with Jacoby and Meyers, and when I see my friends, they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm an attorney with Jacoby and Meyers. They're like, no way. But, listen, what sets us apart is the fact that what I believe is the number one thing is the caring and communication that we have with our clients. During this pandemic, our phones have never closed, have never been turned off. We communicate with our clients constantly. They know what's going on. Each client is working with a team of at least 2 attorneys and other paraprofessionals on their files. Each client gets a password so that they can, at 2 o'clock in the morning, if they want to know what's going on with their case, they can just log on and they can see everything that we're seeing, basically, without talking to us, obviously. But look, my clients, I'm a trial attorney at Jacoby and Meyers. I've been here for 15 years. My clients have my cell phone number. They call me, and I tell them, I encourage them to call me. I don't know other firms where attorneys give out their personal cell phone numbers to their clients because they want to be in contact with them all the time. When things go great for our clients, that's a victory for us. We're happy. We want to make sure that our clients are happy. Why? Because not only are they happy in the moment and we provide them with quality representation, in the future, they're going to say, I don't even have to decide. I have to go back to Gustavo or to Liz because they took care of me, and they'll tell so it's that kind of a relationship that we have with our clients that I think sets us apart. I've heard stories where clients walk into their attorney's offices for months and never are able to speak to an attorney. They speak to the secretary, they speak to a paralegal, but the attorney never talks to them. You walk into our offices, you talk to us. We stop what we're doing and come on in, let's talk. So that's, I think, the individual attention that sets us apart.
You got my vote. What about you, Elizabeth? So, you're also part of Jacoby and Meyers, so it's safe to say you guys have the same team spirit, correct?
Absolutely. I just the only thing I would add on to Gustavo's points, which are all absolutely true. One of the reasons I really enjoy working here is the relationships that I form with my clients. Again, all based on providing you as the client with the information you need to make a decision in a circumstance that you may not understand. I want you to understand, and I want you to make the best decision for yourself. I'm gonna make an analogy to doctors. If you had dental pain, you're not gonna go see a foot doctor. So if you have a workers' compensation claim, come to us. We've been doing it for decades. If you have an injury claim, come to us. That is our niche. It's what we do.
Many of my clients, well, not many, I'd say the majority of my clients, particularly in the Hispanic community, if someone helps them with one thing, they'll keep on coming back to them for anything. And sometimes that person's not even an attorney, which that's a separate subject for another day. So I just want to thank the two of you for your time, for your dedication, for the energy that you're, listen, 7 o'clock at night in the middle of a pandemic. We're not, you're not with your families. Instead, you're here talking to us. So thank you very much for your time and for doing what you do.
Thank you.
My pleasure, and we look forward to helping any of your clients that we can.